Toru was a weak bum whose house and family was destroyed by an overpowered psychopath, so he enrolled in an academy for knights to train and take revenge. However, when he's forced to share rooms with the prettiest girl in the school, he decides to become the strongest knight while cracking all the baddies of the academy along the way. It all started on his way to his first day of school, when Toru spotted a hot chick named Julie, watching the clouds like an idiot. However, Toru's focus is quickly shifted when he is approached by another newcomer named Imari. Imagining her potential, Toru decides to help her navigate the school premises. Soon enough, they reach the lavishly decorated event hall, where the newcomers patiently wait for some action. Just then, the academy's president, Sakuya Tsukumo, emerges like a homeless tarot card reader. She tells the students that whoever is sitting on their right will be their partner. Toru is fine with this news, but when Sakuya reveals their first task is to engage in immediate combat with the person sitting next to them, the students almost lose their minds. Sakuya claims that this is the real entrance exam, because whoever wins the battle will be allowed to stay at the academy, and the losers will be kicked out of the school like Caitlyn Jenner's discarded meat. Hearing this news, the students are filled with confusion and outrage. But Sakuya explains that survival in this battle is the actual entrance exam for Koryo Academy. Toru does not want to hurt Imari, but the chick tells him it's alright. With this, Sakuya tells her students to prepare for battle by using their soul power, also known as Blaze, which is as unique as their fingerprints. Seeing this, the entire auditorium becomes a battleground. All the students start fighting with their friends, but Toru and Imari stand there like idiots. A dark memory from his past resurfaces, making him unable to wield his weapon against his friend. However, Imari has no time for tomfoolery and wants to attend the academy at any cost. While Toru stands there confused, Imari draws her blaze weapon and charges at him, but he quickly moves away like a ninja. Imari proceeds to strike him multiple times after that, but this red-haired chick can't even land one attack on Toru's disgusting body. Imari has no intention of losing, so she channels all her energy into one attack, but Toru stops it with his bare hands. He then admits defeat and even offers to leave the academy, but suddenly a metal weapon charges right at him. This activates his blaze inadvertently, and he is shocked to find that his weapon is a shield instead of a regular sword. However, Imari wants to win the battle at any cost and charges straight at him, but Toru blocks her attack and lands a decisive blow at her little Japanese stomach. As the battle ends, the winners help their opponents get up safely, and later they leave the academy with a heavy heart. Imari is furious with Toru for holding back during their fight. Toru explains that the defensive weapon was not his real blaze and claims that he did not want to hurt her. The red-haired chick finally understands his point and congratulates him for the victory. Inside the classroom, the students take their seats like obedient cows, but just then, the hot chick from earlier named Julie walks in and sits beside Toru. Even when he gets embarrassed, Julio continues staring at him. When Toru finally musters up his courage to talk to her, Julie turns away, hanging him dry every time. Just then, a teacher named Rito Tsukimi, also known as Professor Bun Bun, enters the classroom through the window like a stupid pigeon. While the class watches the professor, confused, Julie keeps staring at Toru, making him incredibly nervous. Eventually, the students begin their introductions, but when it's Toru's turn, he is immediately recognized by the teacher as the famous Irregular, who has a shield as his blaze weapon. Julie eventually introduces herself as well. A few moments later, Professor Bun Bun explains that the students' IDs are loaded with 100,000 yen every month. The students are already fed up with her mannerisms, but just then, Bun Bun reveals the infamous duo system. It turns out that the school's goal is to prepare the students for the Dawn Agency's Peacekeeping Corps, and to do that, students must learn to work in perfect synchronization with a partner. When Tomo gets up to ask a question, Professor Bun Bun tells her students that a duo is expected to do everything together, including classes, dorms, and even other spicy activities.
What do you mean by that?
She claims that official pairings will be decided in a few days, so till then, their temporary partners are based on who they were sitting next to during the opening ceremony. Realizing his partner is Julie, Toru gets up to reject the pairing, but Professor Bun Bun shuts him down, claiming rules are rules no matter what. Later that evening, a desperate Toru tries to see if he can crash in Tora's room to avoid the awkwardness, but Tora kicks him out, telling him to grab his tennis balls and man up. With no other choice, Toru heads to his assigned dorm room and rehearses a few opening statements. As he opens the door, he sees no one inside, but just then, Julie walks in wearing a very short dress,
Yeah, boy.
making the simp paranoid once again. Later, the two sit down, and Toru tries to start over by introducing himself. He discovers that Julie isn't just some mysterious local girl, she is actually a rich girl from Europe. As they talk, Julie gets unexpectedly close to him, using his first name and expressing a deep curiosity about his Japanese sausage.
My time has come.
It turns out she was fascinated by his unique punching technique from the entrance exam and wants to learn it from her. Toru claims that a weak chick like her can't handle such high-level skills, so Julie takes this as a sign to go to sleep. However, she collapses right on Toru's lap, causing the simp to panic once again. He then decides to carry Julie to bed and tucks her in like a proud father. As the girl sleeps peacefully, Toru makes some tea to control the blood supply in his sausage, but Julie wakes up as well, so they both share a tea date inside their dorm room. The following day, Toru is shocked to find Julie sleeping right beside him in his bed.
Oh my God!
A few moments later, this embarrassed pair heads towards the canteen, where Tomo Tachibana and Miyabi Hotogi join them. They claim that they are concerned about the moral implications of Toru and Julie living together. Julie tries to explain the situation, but her choice of words makes the situation sound far more scandalous than it actually is. Now, Toru is forced into a frantic damage control mode, desperately trying to explain that their living situation is purely a result of school policy and not a sign of a secret penetration ceremony. As they reach their classroom, Professor Bun Bun spends the session lecturing the class on the complexities of Lucifers and the manifestation of the blaze. During her lecture, she singles out various students with playful but pointed nicknames. However, calling names publicly makes Tomo incredibly angry. A few moments later, Toru discovers that Julie is proficient at speaking the language, but her writing skills are a complete dumpster fire. Meanwhile, Professor Bun Bun continues her lecture. She warns the students about the rite of sublimation and the grueling physical standards of the academy. Bun Bun claims that the stakes are incredibly high, and any student who fails to level up their abilities over the course of the year faces immediate expulsion. Terrified by the thought of being kicked out, the students quickly get motivated to take their training more seriously. Later that afternoon, the class gathers at the school's dojo for physical practice. Tomo, feeling guilty about her earlier assumptions, offers a deep and formal apology to Toru in front of everyone. Toru is quick to forgive her, but as she tries to stand up from her bow, she loses her balance. This makes her slip and fall directly onto Toru as if she wants to jump on his sausage. On top of this situation, Julie also arrives to witness the aftermath. But instead of being jealous, she innocently concludes that the two are simply practicing jujitsu to get into the UFC. But a few moments later, an intense sparring session between Tomo and Julie takes place. Toru reveals that Tomo comes from a family with a prestigious history in martial arts and that she is a skilled fighter. In the meantime, Tora focuses his attention on Miyabi, but his simp behavior is interrupted when Toru wants to team up with him. After the session concludes, the group is mutually impressed by one another's combat prowess. Back at the dorm, Julie takes a shower and shares a quiet moment over tea with Toru. He learns that Julie learned how to fight by watching YouTube tutorials, while she finds out that Toru and Tora have been training partners since they were little. As the days pass, this routine solidifies the bond between Toru and Julie, with Toru increasingly taking on a protective, caretaker-like role. On the other hand, the deadline for official duo applications looms and the students begin to finalize their partnerships. Toru discusses his options with Tora, assuming they will naturally pair up. Meanwhile, Julie has her heart set on asking Tomo to be her partner. That night, Toru finds Julie in his bed once again and learns a bit more about her past. She confesses to feeling a deep sense of loneliness ever since her father left her life. On the morning of the application deadline, the office is swamped with students, so Toru and Tora decide to return later in the evening. From a distance, Toru sees Julie and Tomo talking and assumes everything is going smoothly. But when the boys finally go to the office to make their partnership official, they are interrupted by Tomo and Miyabi. It turns out that Tomo and Miyabi have decided to pair up together, which means Tomo had to reject Julie's offer. Worried about how Julie is handling the rejection, Toru rushes out to find her like an Andrew Tate fan. After searching the campus, he realizes there's only one place left to check, the top of the clock tower. Toru finds her there, grieving in silence and feeling isolated from the world for some reason. Seeing this, he proposes that they become an official duo from now on, making her overjoyed. Although they have secured their future at the school, Toru still hasn't quite managed to convince Julie to park her juicy dumpers in her own bed. She claims that Toru has become someone as special to her as her father and wants to be by his side. The next day, Professor Boon Boon claims that she is proud of her students because almost all of them have picked their permanent partners. She also reveals that most temporary duos voluntarily pick their temporary partner into permanent partnerships. Julie immediately assumes the professor is highlighting her connection with Toru, which almost makes his sausage erupt with excitement. The focus quickly shifts to their first major challenge, the Ngalia, a high-stakes mock battle where every duo must fight for survival against the rest of the student body. To prepare for this upcoming trial, Toru and his partner dive into an intense training regimen. However, Toru finds himself struggling significantly, enduring a frustrating streak of 4 consecutive losses against Julie. But Julie soon identifies the root of his problem, pointing out that his posture while wielding his defensive armor is whack. This imbalance prevents him from delivering a clean, effective punch. To help him find his rhythm, Julie suggests he mix his fighting style with Nordic mythology, even going as far as to help him name his right fist. While Toru appreciates the guidance, he harbors a lingering fear that if he were to ever use his full strength, he might end up seriously injuring his classmates. Later that evening, Toru discovers Miyabi collapsed on the ground due to severe exhaustion. As she regains consciousness, she finds herself being carried by Toru, who gently insists that she needs to learn how to control her hormones during training. As they make their way toward the school's medical wing, Miyabi reveals a more vulnerable side of herself. Although she isn't the most naturally gifted fighter, she is excited about her potential as a Lucifer user, a rare trait that only a select few possess. Despite this potential, she is painfully aware of the skill gap between herself and powerhouses like Julie and Tomo. Toru validates her feelings, agreeing that her focus on building a strong physical foundation and mastering the basics is the correct path to long-term success. The following day, the Nangalia event finally commences, and the campus's atmosphere shifts from calm to competitive. As the students manifest their blazes, the battle officially begins. Toru and Julie demonstrate remarkable coordination from the start, quickly defeating their first few opponents. They move through the competition like a smooth criminal, taking down duo after duo. With only 1 hour remaining and the field of competitors thinning out, Toru decides to sweep the school building for any remaining targets. Upon entering, they are greeted by a sudden and fierce chain attack from Tomoe. She proves to be their most difficult opponent yet, utilizing her mastery of long-range weapons, massive juicy rice cakes, and judo to keep them off balance. Meanwhile, Tomo skillfully sets the stage for Miyabi to launch a follow-up attack with a massive weapon. For a moment, it appears that Toru and Julie are cornered, but Toru manages to repel Miyabi's strike. Even though the sheer power of the blow forces him back, he is impressed by Miyabi's strength. While Toru and Miyabi share this brief moment of mutual respect, Julie and Tomo are locked into an intense battle. The two trade blows for some time until Julie manages to exploit a momentary lapse in Tomo's defense, securing a victory for her side. With the battle concluded, Tomo and Miyabi gracefully accept their defeat and head back like Sleepy Joe Biden. Julie suggests they might have time for one final encounter before the event ends, and Toru agrees. But just then, they hear someone screaming through the corridors and immediately rush toward the sound. It turns out that Professor Bun Bun defeated them both, and it is revealed that the professor's real name is Rito Tsukimi. She immediately launches an attack at Toru and Julie, and the students are forced to protect themselves from this woman on her period. Toru is horrified to learn that a blaze can actually cause physical bleeding wounds if the user harbors lethal intent. Furthermore, the professor reveals that if a person's blaze is physically shattered, the user will be knocked unconscious for 24 hours. While the students are digesting this information, she quickly resumes her attacks. At one point, Rito nearly lands a lethal blow on Toru's dumb head, but Julie intervenes just in time to save him. Hoping to take the pressure off her partner, Julie attempts to draw the professor's attention to herself, but Rito's superior experience and power quickly put her on the defensive. Seeing Julie struggling, Toru rushes back into the fight to protect her, but as he confronts the professor, she mocks him for his perceived weakness, triggering a vivid memory of his brother saying the same thing. The flashback reignites Toru's anger, allowing him to unleash a devastating strike that Rito narrowly avoids at the last second. Unable to overpower the professor through brute force, Toru and Julie come up with a risky plan. As Rito moves in to finish the fight, Julie steps forward to shield her partner, but Toru reaches the professor first and deliberately places himself in her path like an alpha simp. At first, it appears as though he is recklessly provoking an even fiercer attack, but Julie soon realizes he is creating an opening. Just as Rito prepares to destroy Toru's blaze, Julie moves into position and pins the professor down to have fun with her. With her momentarily restrained, Toru unleashes a concentrated strike aimed directly at her blaze rather than at Rito herself, causing the soul weapon to shatter and ending the battle for good. By the next morning, Toru is finally able to appreciate what they accomplished. Despite still recovering from his injuries like a wussy, he celebrates the success of their strategy, which allowed them to rescue their friends and stop the professor. However, the mood quickly becomes awkward when Julie attempts to treat his wounds by pinning him to the floor like Mia Khalifa. Unfortunately, Tomoe and Miyabi walk in at that exact moment and immediately jump to the wrong conclusion. Later that night, Toru is once again troubled by the nightmare that has been haunting him for days. Unable to relax, he heads out to the balcony where Julie eventually joins him. She asks about the name Ottawa, which she heard him muttering in his sleep. Toru refuses to explain and quietly returns to bed. Hoping to make him feel better, Julie decides to share something personal of her own and reveals a deadly scar on her body. Somewhere near a quiet lakeside, Sarah is seen patiently waiting for her mistress, Lilith Bristol. After Lilith emerges from the water like a floating poop, Sarah informs her that everything has been arranged for the meeting she has been looking forward to. Elsewhere, Toru wakes up from a dream involving the scar on Julie's back, only to discover a far more immediate problem. He finds his hand resting somewhere it definitely should not be, and panic immediately sets in. As he tries to pull away, Julie unknowingly draws him closer like P. Diddy approaching Justin Bieber. The awkward struggle only makes matters worse, eventually ending with Toru falling out of bed and crashing onto the floor. Toru immediately apologizes and attempts to explain what happened. He blames the incident on his own sausage-infested impulse and admits that he has very little experience dealing with girls. Rather than getting upset, Julie calmly accepts part of the responsibility, explaining that she wandered into his bed during the night without telling him. After exchanging apologies, the two settle the matter with a simple good morning before preparing for another day at the academy. On the way to school, Toru and Julie meet up with Tomoe and Miyabi. They are soon joined by Tora and Ryutaro, who are surprised to learn that Tomoe and Miyabi played a major role in rescuing everyone during the previous battle. Grateful for their help, the boys thank them sincerely. The conversation eventually shifts to Professor Rito Tsukimi and her strange behavior during the incident, leaving everyone wondering what exactly had caused her sudden change. Before they can come up with any answers, Rito herself walks into the classroom, as though nothing happened. The students are stunned and immediately demand an explanation, but she brushes aside their concerns like Donald Trump and reminds them that she is still their teacher. Moments later, President Sakuya Tsukumo arrives and explains the situation. Since nobody was unalived and the students ultimately managed to defeat their instructor, she considers the entire incident proof of Rito's effectiveness as a teacher. Sakuya also announces that the Level 2 rite of sublimation will be held in the near future, giving the class something new to focus on. While the class tries to absorb the news, Toru struggles to pay attention to the lesson due to his increase in sausage size. Julie notices his distracted mood, but their conversation is interrupted when Lilith Bristol suddenly enters the classroom. She heads straight for Toru and insists on speaking with him privately. Although Toru and Tora protest, Lilith reveals that she has special privileges that allow her to ignore the usual rules. Once they are alone, Lilith introduces herself as a transfer student from Britain and immediately asks Toru to abandon Julie and become her duo instead. Claiming that her status as an exception places her above normal academy regulations, she confidently presents her offer. Toru listens to the feces coming out of her mouth and everything she has to say, but remains completely unimpressed. Without any hesitation, he rejects her proposal and walks away, leaving Lilith genuinely shocked that someone would turn her down so easily. Unfortunately for Toru, skipping class to deal with Lilith earns him a punishment. He is forced to run multiple 4-kilometer laps around the academy grounds like a golden retriever. After finally finishing the punishment, he heads to the showers, only to discover that Julie intends to join him with her tight opening in her legs. However, Toru manages to stop her before she enters, since he didn't trim his forest down there. Later, as they drink tea together, Julie suggests that they start sleeping in the same bed again. Hoping to redirect the conversation, Toru proposes taking a trip off campus instead. Convinced he has successfully changed the subject, he remains unaware that Julie is already looking forward to the outing, hoping to grill his sausage one of these days. The following day, the pair sets off on their excursion. Julie is immediately fascinated by the seagulls flying nearby. Toru reveals that Miyabi helped him organize the itinerary, and both of them appreciate her recommendations. Their first destination is a large shopping mall. Toru initially asks Julie to stay close, but things quickly go off track when a group of energetic children becomes fascinated by her. In response, Julie grabs Toru's hand and refuses to let go, creating an unintentionally romantic scene that attracts attention from nearby shoppers. Their hand-holding eventually leads them into a clothing store. The enthusiastic shopkeeper assumes they are a couple and becomes increasingly excited as Julie tries on outfit after outfit. Toru spends much of the visit waiting while the employee enthusiastically recommends more clothes for Julie to model. After selecting several new outfits, Julie pays using her student identification card, and the purchases are arranged to be delivered back to the academy. The pair then continues their stroll through the mall, though the same group of children eventually returns and begins following Julie around like serial offenders in P. Diddy category. Later, they sit down to enjoy some ice cream and sample each other's flavors. Trouble starts when Toru realizes the rum-flavored ice cream has affected Julie far more than expected, leaving her dazed and acting almost drunk. Watching from afar, Tomoe and Miyabi completely misinterpret the situation and convince themselves that the situation is getting moist. Unfortunately, their surveillance comes to an abrupt end when 4 thugs corner them. As tensions rise, Toru prepares to intervene, but before he can act, Lilith appears and decides to handle the situation herself. She manifests her blaze, which takes the unusual form of a firearm rather than a traditional weapon. She then quickly neutralizes the threat, leaving Toru with an even greater appreciation for her abilities. The encounter also gives him a glimpse of why she carries herself with so much confidence. Afterward, the group returns to their shopping, but the day ends with one final misunderstanding. Toru somehow finds himself standing behind a changing room curtain while the girls browse undergarments. When they realize he is there, they react with absolute horror, leaving him caught in yet another awkward situation. The following day, Tomoe and Miyabi are still trying to make sense of Lilith's abilities. The idea of a blaze taking the form of a firearm seems completely at odds with everything they know. Eventually, they chalk it up to her status as an exception, accepting that normal rules simply do not apply to this broad. Elsewhere, Lilith spends her morning maintaining her weapon. As she carefully cleans the firearm, her thoughts drift away from combat and toward a fantasy in which she and Toru have finally become duo partners. Later, the class gathers at the school pool for training. Tomoe, Tora, and Ryutaro proudly demonstrate the improvements they have achieved since their last evaluation. While everyone else seems excited about their progress, Toru finds himself wondering why he has not noticed a more dramatic change in his flagpole's size despite recently receiving an injection from the Academy's medical staff. Meanwhile, Miyabi's growth is impossible to ignore. She displays a huge increase in both speed and strength, outperforming nearly everyone around her. She credits her improvement to the encouragement Toru gave her earlier, though the others initially find the explanation difficult to believe. After some discussion, they eventually accept that her success is the result of hard work finally paying off. Conversation is interrupted when Rito begins boasting about her own development. She jokingly draws attention to her sagging juggernauts, creating a brief moment of embarrassment for everyone nearby. Before the discussion can go any further, Julie enters the pool and immediately attracts attention. However, the admiration quickly turns into amusement when it becomes clear that she cannot swim at all. Despite her struggles in the water, the group encourages her to keep trying, while Miyabi jokingly complains that all of the attention has shifted away from her. After training ends, Toru notices Lilith lingering nearby and decides to speak with her. Curious about both her abilities and her constant absence from class, he asks why she never seems interested in her studies. Lilith explains that she completed her education long ago and has no interest in normie activities. According to her, the academy is merely a place to pass the time while she pursues her real objective, convincing Toru to become her partner. Sensing that he still has questions about the events at the mall, Lilith offers to explain more. However, she only agrees to do so if he accompanies her immediately without asking any questions. With few alternatives available, Toru reluctantly agrees like a simp. Now, Lilith takes him to an amusement park called Death Kneeland. By leaving with her, Toru unknowingly abandons Julie back at school, where Rito and Tomo waste no time teasing her about being left behind. While Julie quietly deals with her confusion, Toru spends the day being dragged from one attraction to another like a purr monkey. Lilith attacks every ride with endless enthusiasm, while Toru gradually becomes more exhausted. By the time the sun sets, he looks completely drained, while Lilith remains full of energy. Their final stop is a shooting-themed horror attraction. Inside, Toru witnesses Lilith's incredible accuracy firsthand. Her performance prompts her to explain more about her upbringing in Britain, where hunting was a common hobby. Years of experience with firearms eventually shaped her blaze into a gun, rather than a stupid NPC weapon. For the first time, Toru begins to understand her a little better. Beneath her arrogance, he sees someone who is surprisingly innocent and childlike in certain ways. Later, as fireworks light up the sky, Toru finally asks about her decision to use her blaze in public. Lilith dismisses his concerns and insists that she was simply protecting the person she intends to make her duo. She once again describes how perfectly they would complement one another in battle, with her acting as the offensive weapon and him serving as the defensive shield. Confident that the arrangement is ideal, she renews her offer for him to join her. Being the G he is, Toru refuses once again. He then leaves the amusement park and returns to the academy, only to discover that the dormitory has already been locked for the night. Just as he begins considering what to do next, Julie appears on a balcony above him and calls out. Following her instructions, he manages to get inside, though the two are briefly forced to hide together to avoid being spotted by the night patrol. Once they are safely back in the dormitory, Toru tells Julie everything that happened during his time with Lilith. Most importantly, he makes it clear that he rejected Lilith's proposal yet again. Julie is visibly relieved by the news, and as the night grows colder, she moves closer to him for some moist action. Elsewhere, Miyabi is shown worrying excessively about Toru's absence, revealing just how concerned she had become. The following morning, Toru skips his regular class and is immediately subjected to a demanding physical punishment that leaves him exhausted before the school day has even properly begun. Unfortunately, he receives little time to recover because Rito gathers the students and announces that the first-year class has been challenged to an inter-class competition against the second years known as the Morocco. The mood immediately becomes more serious. The second-year students possess a fearsome reputation, with many of them having already advanced to level 2 or even level 3. Before the competition can begin properly, a loud voice echoes through the arena as an unexpected participant storms onto the field and demands that the event start immediately. The second-year students are annoyed by the interruption, but their irritation quickly turns into disbelief when the newcomer effortlessly defeats one of them. As expected, the intruder is the big melon holder, Lilith. Wielding her firearm-type blaze, she tears through the second-year opposition almost single-handedly. Within moments, what was supposed to be a structured competition has been completely thrown into disarray. While her actions technically hand the first years a victory, they also ruin the event that had been carefully organized by the Academy. Faced with the mess she created, Lilith proposes a simple solution. Rather than continuing with the original competition, she suggests a new challenge. She will take on the entire first-year class by herself in a survival-style battle, and their only objective will be to remain standing against her. Lilith's challenge quickly becomes impossible for the class to ignore. With no other option available, the students accept and begin preparing for the survival event. That night, several of them attempt to launch a coordinated sneak attack against her like beta males, hoping to overwhelm her through numbers. The plan fails almost immediately as Lilith defeats the group like they're insects and continues moving through the area like a B-2 bomber jet. Above the battlefield, law enforcement personnel observe the exercise from helicopters while monitoring the situation below. Amid the chaos, Lilith eventually comes face to face with Toru. Rather than attacking right away, Toru catches her off guard by apologizing for how he handled her duo proposal. He explains that while he still has no intention of accepting her offer, he regrets the way he rejected her. Toru also admits that he wants to face her at her very best, and hopes that once everything is over, they can spend one moist night together. Lilith initially thinks he sounds ridiculous, but she accepts the deal nonetheless. The two immediately begin exchanging blows. Lilith opens fire while Toru skillfully deflects every shot that comes his way, Before long, Tomo and Ryutaro arrive to support him, helping pressure Lilith from multiple directions. However, this pressure is short-lived because Julie appears ahead of schedule. Lilith quickly takes advantage of the disruption and slips away before the group can corner her. After regrouping, Takabana proposes two options: pursue Lilith directly, or establish a perimeter and force her into a trap like a rabid dog. The group chooses the second plan and splits into separate teams. As Toru and the others continue their search, they begin finding defeated students scattered throughout the area. The trail makes it obvious that Lilith is moving through the competition very efficiently. Their fears are confirmed when Ryutaro is suddenly shot down. Toru immediately charges after Lilith in an attempt to stop her, but she escapes like a side chick and leaves him behind. Frustrated by Lilith's constant games, Julie launches an aggressive attack of her own. Lilith easily outmaneuvers her and shuts down the attack without much difficulty. Seeing Julie in danger, Toru rushes in to help. The sight clearly irritates Lilith, prompting her to fire a potentially lethal shot. At the last moment, Tomo throws herself into the line of fire and protects Julie. The intervention creates enough of a distraction for Toru to continue pursuing Lilith. Once the group reaches safety, they discover that Tomo has been injured. Julie immediately blames herself, but Tomo tells her to stop her whining. She insists that protecting her friends is simply part of being a teammate. Although she is concerned about Julie's reckless behavior, the group quickly shifts its focus back to defeating Lilith before she eliminates everyone else. Now, the students gather to discuss a final strategy, placing Toru at the center of the plan, since he is a dumb scapegoat. Before they separate, Julie asks to speak with him alone and admits that she has been worried ever since Lilith appeared. Despite Toru's repeated rejections, Julie fears that he might eventually be swayed by Lilith's power and choose her as his new duo partner. Toru immediately puts those fears to rest and promises Julie that he has no intention of abandoning her juicy rice cakes, and assures her that he plans to remain by her side. The reassurance quickly eases her concerns, allowing the two to rejoin the others. However, their conversation is interrupted when Lilith reappears. Realizing that the remaining students are prepared to fight until the end, she prepares for one final battle. This time, the class works together far more effectively than before. Julie and Tora coordinate their attacks perfectly, forcing Lilith to constantly defend herself. Julie continues blocking incoming shots despite the punishment she has already endured, while Tora struggles to keep up with the pace of the fight. As the pressure mounts, Toru re-enters the battle and deliberately puts himself in harm's way, thinking someone will make a TikTok edit of him. He takes a hit but uses the opportunity to lure Lilith into a specific location. Once she is exactly where he wants her, Toru destroys the floor beneath them and traps her in a vulnerable position. For a moment, it appears that the plan has succeeded, but Lilith quickly proves otherwise. Refusing to go down, she unleashes a frightening burst of power and overwhelms Miyabi, Tora, and Julie at the same time. At this point, Lilith believes that the victory is already hers, so she lowers her guard for an instant, but that brief moment is all Julie needs. To Lilith's surprise, Julie emerges completely unharmed. It is revealed that she had secretly been wearing a protective shield beneath her clothing throughout the battle like a sneaky repeat offender. Before anyone can celebrate, a real bullet suddenly tears through the battlefield and strikes Toru. The source of the shot is quickly revealed to be Kevin Wayfair, an operative acting under orders from the Master Armorer. It turns out that Kevin has arrived to take Lilith into custody. When she refuses to cooperate, he immediately opens fire on her as well. Julie and Tora attempt to fight back, but Kevin's highly trained subordinates overpower them like a drunk husband with his wife. The situation grows even worse when Kevin threatens to unalive Miyabi unless Lilith surrenders. Faced with no other choice, she agrees to go with him in order to protect her friend. Even so, the rest of the class refuses to stand aside and watch. Although they spent most of the event fighting against her, the students have come to see Lilith as one of their own. So Toru takes the lead and insists on rescuing her despite her objections. Growing tired of the interference, Kevin orders his men to open fire. Immediately, Toru endures the barrage and pushes forward with the last of his remaining strength. Instead of attacking Kevin directly, he channels everything into a single punch like Monkey D. Luffy, aimed at the floor beneath them. Kevin initially laughs at what appears to be a desperate and pointless move, but his confidence disappears when the structure begins to collapse. As the ground gives way beneath them, Lilith starts falling into the opening, but Toru manages to catch her just in time. Meanwhile, Julie and Tora arrive and prevent Kevin's forces from interfering, allowing the rescue to proceed without hiccups. After the battle finally comes to an end, Kevin emerges from the rubble like the Undertaker and reports the mission's failure to his superiors. Although he was unable to capture Lilith, he notes that he gathered valuable information during the operation. In particular, he expresses interest in the individual connected to the Blaze Diabolica and the potential displayed by the Exceeds. The following morning, the students gather in the medical room to check on Toru as he recovers from his injuries. Before long, Lilith arrives as well. She thanks everyone for risking themselves to save her and expresses her desire to become friends with everyone. She then offers Toru her friendship instead of another moist activity proposal. To everyone's amusement this time, Toru happily accepts the deal. A few days later, beginning with Miyabi alone in the shower, as she reflects on her perceived uselessness during the recent night incident. She dwells on her inability to contribute meaningfully and starts doubting her abilities, but her quiet moment is interrupted when Tomo enters the shower area with her juggernauts, refusing to let her partner stay depressed. Tomo speaks firmly but gently, reminding Miyabi that she is valued and deeply cared for by the group. However, the mention of affection causes Miyabi to spiral into overthinking, interpreting Tomo's words as fake and untrue. The scene transitions to a boat voyage, marking the beginning of a summer training camp. The atmosphere is immediately complicated by Julie's seasickness, forcing her to rest her head on Toru's disgustingly smelly lap as she tries to endure the rocking motion of the vessel. Toru remains optimistic despite the situation, believing the camp will become a defining experience for them. Miyabi soon arrives to check on Julie, but as she attempts to sit beside Toru, the boat suddenly jolts. This causes her to lose her balance and crash into his sausage, creating an awkward moment that draws attention from nearby students. The interruption is followed by Tora and another student arriving to announce an upcoming meeting with Rito, with Tomo soon confirming the final call. Once everyone gathers, Rito delivers a major announcement about the camp's core trial. The students are instructed to jump from the boat and swim across open water to reach a distant island. Those who succeed will earn significant advancement and be exempt from future testing in the final term. However, the stakes are doubled by a harsh rule. If one member fails, their duo partner is also considered to have failed, regardless of individual performance. Without further delay, the students are thrown into the sea like toilet waste. Toru quickly falls behind due to Julie's difficulty with swimming, forcing him to adjust their pace while trying to reassure her. Midway through the swim, a helicopter appears overhead, and Lilith arrives dramatically from the sky. She explains she was delayed due to choosing the perfect swimsuit, then immediately dives into the ocean. Her arrival disrupts the dynamic between Julie and Toru, especially as she begins treating the swim as a competition. Upon learning about the race to the island, Lilith declares that she will compete as well, challenging them to reach shore first. By the time the three reach the island, Toru is completely exhausted, but on the other hand, Julie is more concerned with her moist clothing and piercing organs, and immediately begins removing it to dry off. Seeing this, Toru panics and quickly stops her, preventing a very public embarrassment. Meanwhile, Lilith states that she has no intention of hindering their progress and is only participating for her own interest. When Toru thanks her for earlier help, she casually requests a reward in return, but her demand is so forward that he immediately refuses. The situation becomes even more chaotic when Toru notices that Julie's clothes have been blown away by the wind toward the sea. Elsewhere on the island, Tomo and Miyabi continue their trek. Miyabi struggles with self-doubt, slowing their progress, but Tomo remains steady and supportive. She reminds Miyabi that they share both success and failure as a duo, and that her hesitation affects them both. This reassurance gradually restores Miyabi's confidence, allowing her annoying dumper to push forward alongside her partner. As evening approaches, the group continues toward the training camp location. The terrain becomes rough, and Toru removes his shirt like a performative man to protect Lilith's feet while they walk. The gesture, along with their conversation, draws Julie's attention and triggers visible jealousy. She then separates from the group and attempts to take a different path, but her decision backfires when her skirt gets caught on a branch. The situation is quickly resolved, but tension rises again when the group is suddenly ambushed by 4 ninja attackers hidden in the forest. Within seconds, the ninjas use blaze and terrain advantage to control the battlefield, forcing the group deeper into the forest and preventing effective counterattacks. For a few minutes, Julie and Lilith are pushed into a purely defensive position as they struggle to land a hit. However, they eventually coordinate their movements and strip the attackers of their advantage, allowing Lilith to finish the fight with a decisive blow. At the same time, Tomo and Miyabi's juicy juggernauts face their own ambush. Miyabi initially freezes under pressure, placing Tomo in danger as she is surrounded. However, Miyabi recalls her earlier failures and the incident at the mall, and uses that memory to push past her hesitation. She then regains her focus and uses her blaze effectively to turn the tide, rescuing her partner. On the other hand, Toru, separated from the others, it deals with a different attacker while navigating a series of hidden traps scattered throughout the forest. He moves through them like an American soldier in Vietnam and manages to reach his opponent. However, just as he prepares to strike, he discovers the masked attacker is Imari. Toru is surprised to see Imari in the academy premises, while she asks him to control his hormones after seeing her. It turns out that the students who were eliminated during the opening ceremony were not expelled, but instead transferred to a remote branch of the academy. The camp is actually a joint training exercise between both branches, followed by a celebratory gathering. The students enjoy a large outdoor feast, with Rito discussing her future plans for the academy. Imari also shares her experience at the branch, explaining that although she was initially surprised by her transfer, the intense training there significantly improved her abilities. During the celebration, Julie approaches Toru after failing to find food at the main table. He shares some of his meal with her like she's a pet Labrador. Lilith later joins them, carrying large plates of food and demands that Toru feed her, but Julie takes over instead, feeding Lilith herself. Nearby, Toru speaks with Rito, who reiterates her belief that everything at the academy is justified if it advances the goal of creating the absolute duo. Elsewhere, Miyabi struggles to process compliments from her former opponents, who acknowledge her growth. Being a supportive friend, Tomo reinforces their praise, finally helping Miyabi accept her own improvement. Overwhelmed by embarrassment, she retreats to the food table where she nearly expresses her desire to gobble up Toru's sausage. As the night winds down, the tone shifts. Kevin and Edward Walker are seen finalizing a mysterious device, though one key component is still missing. Edward emphasizes strict secrecy regarding their work, which Kevin accepts without hesitation. Back at the camp, as the students settle in for the night, Julie reflects on the events of the day, and like a total idiot, She hands her undergarments to Toru as a token of love. The night is interrupted for Toru when he wakes up to a highly compromising situation. He finds himself pressed uncomfortably close to Lilith's juggernauts on one side, while Julie is positioned on his other side in an equally awkward arrangement. Panicked by the situation, he quickly pulls away from both of them. The situation only worsens when Tomo enters the room to begin the morning wake-up call. After sunrise, the training camp routine continues, though a lingering sense of tension remains. Tomoe approaches Toru once again to apologize for the morning misunderstanding, but her concern draws unwanted attention from Tora, Ryutaro, and Imari. The situation escalates further when Julie almost reveals details of the previous night's sleeping arrangement. Toru quickly stops her before she can say anything more, preventing her from revealing penetration information. Despite friction within the group and Rito's usual attitude, Miyabi takes charge of organizing the day's schedule. She appears unusually cheerful, internally attributing her mood to her feelings for Toru. Now, the camp proceeds in this atmosphere until Sakuya announces that the final day of training is approaching. As the camp nears its end, the group splits up for different activities. Lilith and Julie go for a skincare session, Tora heads off for a solo dive, and Ryutaro continues his physical training. With most of the boys occupied, Miyabi finds herself alone with Toru with a thunderous desire to get horizontal with him. After an awkward exchange, they agree to meet later at the beach, the island's most popular location. Later, Toru arrives at the shore as the only active male present, since Tora is asleep and Ryutaro remains focused on training. The girls gradually arrive, and Toru is briefly distracted by Julie's appearance before Lilith, Tomo, Miyabi, Rito, and Imari also join them. What begins as a casual outing turns into a bikini critique session, initiated by Lilith. The group eventually enters the water, but Toru is told he cannot join until he honestly evaluates Rito's outfit. When he responds without interest, Rito is visibly offended, and even jokes about wanting to get rid of him as a student. From a distance, Miyabi watches the interaction with growing discomfort, especially as Rito and Toru appear increasingly close. Meanwhile, Imari quietly observes this jealousy while the rest of the group continues enjoying the beach. Hataka eventually gathers the courage to invite Toru into the water, but the moment is interrupted when he notices Julie struggling in the waves. Julie is unable to keep herself afloat and is hit by a wave that causes her swimsuit top to come loose, revealing her rice cakes. Toru quickly averts his gaze and rushes to help her recover, but the situation becomes chaotic as he tries to manage the embarrassment. At the same time, Lilith clings to him, adding further tension to the scene. Imari continues observing all of this carefully, studying the complex relationships within the group, and taking particular interest in Miyabi's reactions. As the day ends, Toru heads to the hot springs to relax, only to realize that the girls are bathing on the other side of a thin partition. He unintentionally overhears a loud and exaggerated conversation about their physical attributes, including direct comparisons involving Miyabi. Rito openly evaluates the others, treating it as a competition before shifting her attention to Tomoe. The conversation becomes more chaotic when Imari confirms her suspicions about Miyabi's feelings for Toru. She warns Miyabi that many rivals exist for his attention, especially Julie. In a moment of honesty, Miyabi also realizes that Imari wants to sniff Toru's sausage, though Imari ultimately chooses to step back and encourages Miyabi to pursue him. When the group leaves the hot springs, Miyabi is overwhelmed by thoughts of confessing to Toru. Distracted, she slips and injures her ankle. Imari uses the opportunity to push Toru into carrying her, while also convincing the others to return to camp without them. Left alone together, Miyabi takes the chance to ask Toru to call her by her first name, marking a shift in their closeness. The two eventually reach a spot overlooking the sunset, where Miyabi gathers the courage to confess her feelings. Toru initially seems ready to accept her confession, but the moment is abruptly disrupted by a surge of trauma from his past. The psychological weight of his memories overwhelms him, and he immediately rejects her like an alpha male on TikTok. Miyabi is devastated by the rejection and loses control of her emotions, running away from the scene and leaving Toru alone. While this unfolds at the shore, Lilith meets with Sakuya to discuss her reasons for attending the academy and her connection to the Blaze Diabolica. Their conversation leads to the conclusion that an old man is likely orchestrating a larger plan scheduled for that night. It becomes clear that Sakuya's presence at this branch is tied to a broader strategy involving Toru, though his disgusting, dumb brain remains unaware of it. Meanwhile, Toru reflects alone on what just happened with Miyabi and the emotional weight behind his rejection. His thoughts are interrupted when he notices the camp coming under a large-scale, coordinated attack by armed soldiers. He notices that the attack is led by Kevin, who has returned with a vengeful intent. Within just a few minutes, the training camp descends into full-scale war as Tomoe and a small group of students find themselves overwhelmed by a massive force of armored soldiers. They are forced into continuous combat, while also carrying the emotional weight of Miyabi's sudden disappearance. On top of that, the situation worsens further as the enemy pressure continues to increase, without signs of reinforcement. Inside the academy headquarters, a tense briefing unfolds. Sarah reports to Lilith, Rito, and Sakuya about the nature of the attack. The attack is revealed to be part of Edward Walker's plan, functioning as a first-round selection. designed to test the students under extreme conditions. The crisis escalates further when they learn that the main branch is also under simultaneous attack, cutting off any possibility of outside support. With no other option available, Sakuya orders Rito to deploy to the front lines immediately. On the battlefield, the students begin to lose ground as exhaustion and morale deteriorate faster than Joe Biden's cognitive ability. Just as their defenses start to collapse, Toru arrives with reinforcements. He is joined by Rito, who immediately enters combat with full force. With her limiter removed, Rito, known as the Firefly, unleashes overwhelming power on the enemy forces. The soldiers quickly realize they are facing an exception, and their advanced weapons become ineffective against her speed and strength. At this point, Rito's offensive completely disrupts the battlefield, forcing the enemy into retreating formations. After witnessing her overwhelming ability firsthand, Toru regroups with Julie. For a brief moment, Julie suggests like a wussy that they focus on tending to the wounded, but their attention is interrupted when Tomo arrives in a panic, still searching desperately for Miyabi. Meanwhile, at the Academy main branch, reports confirm that the large-scale assault there was stopped by a single individual rather than a coordinated defense. However, the situation at headquarters escalates again when Kevin Wayfair breaches the inner area with the intent of capturing Sakuya. Lilith immediately engages him, managing to eliminate two of his subordinates like Roronoa Zoro, but Kevin reveals that the operation is far from over and that he still holds tactical advantages. Just then, a sudden explosion shakes Sakuya's quarters, scattering the defenders all around. In the aftermath, Tomoe orders her remaining allies to search for survivors inside the mansion, while she continues searching for Miyabi alongside Imari. Now, Toru enters the damaged building and finds Sarah treating an injured Lilith. Although relieved to see him, Lilith expresses frustration and guilt over failing to stop Kevin from abducting Sakuya. Recognizing the stakes, Toru and Julie shift their focus to a rescue mission and move out immediately. A few moments later, they eventually locate Kevin, who remains calm and confident, as if the situation is already under his control. When questioned about his motives, Kevin refuses to answer, and instead mocks Toru, calling him a Republican. He makes it clear that his current objective is to eliminate him. And since neither side is backing down, a fierce battle begins. Toru and Julie initially struggle against Kevin's defensive capabilities. His arrogance creates a brief opening for the students, allowing Toru to land a clean strike. But the advantage quickly disappears. Kevin reveals that his specialized unit grants him far greater defensive power than the standard soldiers under his command. Realizing the threat level has increased, Toru pushes forward aggressively while Julie synchronizes her movements with his. A few moments later, Toru is forced to take a critical risk to save Julie from a fatal attack. In doing so, he is severely injured with a stab wound to his hideously disgusting body. Despite this, he continues fighting to protect her. Meanwhile, Julie, driven by desperation and emotion, launches a reckless counterattack but is quickly knocked unconscious. As Kevin prepares to deliver a finishing blow, Toru crawls forward to shield her. Frustrated by Toru's persistence, Kevin tortures him further, targeting his already injured body. This sight triggers a violent emotional response in Julie. Memories of her past loss resurface, pushing her into a sudden transformation. In this state, Julie overwhelms Kevin completely, striking him repeatedly and breaking through his defenses like American soldiers in Venezuela. Her attacks become increasingly unstable as her rage intensifies, and she nearly turns on Toru when he calls out to her. However, the transformation collapses shortly afterward due to exhaustion, and she falls unconscious. Seeing the situation shift and receiving orders that the mission objective has changed, Kevin retreats. But before leaving, he mocks Toru one final time, dismissing his strength as insignificant, and disappears into the shadows. In the aftermath, both branches of the Academy begin tending to the wounded and stabilizing the situation. Lilith thanks Toru and Julie for successfully completing the rescue of Sakuya, though she remains suspicious of the attacker's true identity and long-term motives. During recovery, Julie finally opens up to Toru about her past. She reveals the story of her father, a hero who died in a battle he could not win. She explains that the scar on her back was left by the man who killed him, marking both trauma and the beginning of her desire for revenge and strength. Hearing this crappy story, Toru simply thanks her for saving his life. While Toru and Julie process the aftermath, Miyabi struggles with her own internal collapse. Her insecurity and emotional dependence on Toru leave her vulnerable, and she is eventually approached by Edward Walker. Exploiting her fragile state, Edward offers her a path to absolute strength, promising that he can give her everything she desires. The day after leaving the island, Toru finds it impossible to stop thinking about Miyabi's sudden disappearance. More than anything, he feels guilty for what happened to Tomoe. Despite begging Sakuya for permission to remain behind and continue the search, Tomoe had no choice but to return to the academy without her partner. The uncertainty surrounding Miyabi's fate hangs heavily over everyone as they make their way back home. Once they arrive at the main branch, life quickly returns to routine. Toru is immediately thrown back into training like a repeat offender, doing his best to focus on the tasks in front of him. He reassures himself that everything will eventually work out, especially since Imari promised to continue searching for Miyabi. Even so, the situation remains difficult for Tomoe. Out of everyone, she is taking the disappearance the hardest. Her frustration and anxiety become so overwhelming that she nearly strangles Toru during training before Rito steps in to break things up like a UFC referee. In the coming days, Tomoe remains unable to accept that her partner is gone, and every passing day seems to make the reality harder to bear. On top of that, the emotional toll becomes increasingly obvious to everyone around her. The atmosphere inside the classroom isn't much better. Rumors and speculation about Miyabi's disappearance spread throughout the student body, making it nearly impossible for anyone to focus on their studies. Toru spends most of the lesson lost in thought until Lilith suddenly arrives and disrupts the gloomy mood with her jiggling juggernauts. Julie follows shortly afterward, immediately exchanging sarcastic remarks with the British transfer student as usual. When Tomoe eventually enters the classroom, Lilith notices her depressed state and decides to intervene in her own unconventional way. Rather than offering sympathy, she deliberately tries to provoke a reaction out of her, and surprisingly, the tactic works. While Lilith's methods are questionable at best, they succeed in pulling Tomoe's attention away from her sadness. Julie ends up getting caught in the chaos as well, and becomes so flustered by Lilith's behavior that she covers Toru's eyes to stop him from witnessing the moist tomfoolery in front of him. That night, Toru once again finds himself haunted by nightmares. The growing list of problems weighing on his mind prevents him from finding any real peace. Just then, Julie notices his distress and moves closer to embrace him with her honkers. The following day, the headmistress personally thanks Toru for helping rescue her during the recent attack. So, as a reward, she offers him the opportunity to undergo the level 4 rite. At first, Toru listens carefully to the proposal. However, the more he thinks about it, the more uneasy he becomes. The possibility of gaining additional power is tempting, but he cannot shake his fear of losing control over himself in the process. Just as Sakuya begins to believe she has convinced him, Toru ultimately refuses the offer. Rather than forcing the issue, Sakuya hands him the injection and tells him the decision is his to make. He can use it whenever he chooses, but she reminds him that the world rarely bends to accommodate personal doubts and fears of low-life creatures like him. Before leaving, she also informs him about an upcoming conference that will bring together several influential figures, including the mysterious equipment smith. The conversation leaves Toru with even more questions than answers. His uncertainty becomes so obvious that even Julie notices something is bothering him. The next morning, the academy feels completely different. Most of the students quickly notice the unusually high level of security throughout the campus. Elite graduates and upper-level students have taken over guard duty as if the school is preparing for the invasion of Venezuela. As word spreads about the conference, the students begin to understand why security has been tightened. Many of the guards are powerful level 3 students, and their presence alone suggests that important guests are expected to arrive. While some believe the precautions are excessive, Lilith remains suspicious. Her concerns deepen when Sakuya personally invites her to attend the conference. Not long afterward, Toru and Julie seek Lilith out. They want answers regarding Equipment Smith and the purpose of the gathering. Unable to refuse Toru's request, Lilith reveals what she knows. According to her, Equipment Smith is actually Edward Walker, a highly influential figure connected to a powerful military organization. More importantly, he serves as the leader of the group commonly known as the Rebels. His ultimate objective revolves around achieving the Absolute Duo, the same goal that Sakuya has been pursuing through the academy. Lilith explains that Absolute Duo represents a state beyond the normal limits of the soul, a level of power that ordinary Blaze users cannot reach. The academy itself was founded around the pursuit of that ideal. Meanwhile, the conference finally begins and Sakuya enters the meeting hall and finds several influential guests already waiting, including Aggie, Clovis, Yugo, and Beatrix. Shortly afterward, Edward Walker arrives and formally begins the discussion. Before long, Edward proposes an alliance between the various factions represented in the room. While several attendees appear willing to cooperate, Sakuya immediately rejects the idea while LARPing Hillary Clinton. She argues that their goals may appear similar on the surface, but the paths they have chosen are fundamentally different. Because of that, true cooperation is impossible. Edward does not take the rejection well. Already carrying resentment towards Sakuya's family due to conflicts involving her grandfather, he sees her refusal as a personal insult. Determined to prove her wrong, he proposes an alternative solution. Rather than debating philosophy, they will settle the matter through direct competition. Edward announces that he will send his rebels to attack the academy. Whichever side eliminates the other first will be declared the victor. To everyone's surprise, Sakuya accepts the challenge without hesitation. Elsewhere, Toru continues wrestling with his own doubts like a girl. Lilith argues that achieving great strength always requires giving something up in return. Sacrifice is simply part of the process. Toru, however, refuses to accept that answer and remains unwilling to compromise his beliefs. But before the discussion can continue, the sound of aircraft engines echoes across the sky. News quickly spreads regarding the agreement reached between Sakuya and Edward. That evening, the students come face to face with Kevin and a group of rebel soldiers. Then, to everyone's shock, Miyabi appears alongside them like a classic plot twist in a stupid anime. Tomoe is immediately overwhelmed with relief after finally seeing her partner alive and unharmed. However, something feels wrong. Lilith notices that Miyabi's demeanor is completely different from before, and the change is impossible to ignore. Moments later, Miyabi removes her school uniform and reveals a new combat outfit. Standing beside Kevin, she confidently declares that she has finally obtained the strength she always wanted, freaking out her friends on the other side. Miyabi immediately manifests her blaze and attacks the guards standing between her and her former classmates. Determined to prove that she has finally become strong, she charges forward like a toxic ex-wife. Toru is furious at what he's seeing and demands to know what Kevin did to manipulate her. Before he can get any answers, Miyabi turns her attention toward him and launches a direct attack. Toru struggles to defend himself and is nearly overwhelmed until Julie intervenes at the last possible moment. Seeing this, the rest of the group quickly joins the battle. As the fight continues, Tomo is the first to identify the source of Miyabi's sudden power. After observing her abilities, she concludes that the rebels' experimental fusion equipment is amplifying her strength far beyond normal limits. Meanwhile, Edward Walker watches the events unfold from a nearby conference room. Confident in his work, he proudly tells the gathered officials that combining an Exceed student with his specialized technology represents the peak of modern research. In his eyes, Miyabi's transformation is proof that his methods are superior. Back on the battlefield, Tomo refuses to give up on her partner. Instead of focusing on the fight, she tries to reach Miyabi emotionally and begs her to come home like a desperate lesbian. But Miyabi responds with hostility and lashes out at Tomoe, mocks her weakness, and lands a devastating blow that leaves her badly injured. At the conference, Edward attempts to use this situation to pressure Sakuya into forming an alliance. He argues that the results speak for themselves and that his approach is the future. However, the plan immediately backfires when Sakuya reveals that she has already discovered and removed the spies Edward planted inside her academy. The revelation leaves Edward embarrassed, and he almost pees his pants with embarrassment. Outside, Tomo struggles to accept that Miyabi is willing to choose this path by abandoning the scissoring they did in the past. For the first time, Miyabi openly expresses the frustrations she has been carrying for so long. She claims that Tomo never truly understood her feelings and reveals how deeply Toru's rejection affected her. Seeing the situation spiral further out of control, Toru finally enters the battle himself. He summons his blaze and engages Tomo directly. Even with his abilities, he struggles to keep up with her relentless attacks. Miyabi repeatedly forces him onto the defensive and nearly defeats him before the others arrive to create a distraction. Their intervention gives Toru a chance to regroup, but once the group is pushed back, Miyabi immediately resumes her strikes. At the same time, Kevin decides to move forward with his own plans. He orders his elite soldiers to ignore the students and head directly towards Sakuya, hoping to end the main cow. As far as he's concerned, Miyabi can handle the remaining opposition on her own. Just as Miyabi prepares to finish Toru off, Tomoe steps in once again. She tells Toru and the others to continue pursuing Kevin while she deals with Miyabi personally. Although reluctant, they agree and move toward the conference building. Seeing this, Miyabi becomes even angrier when she realizes Tomo still refuses to abandon her. As Toru's group approaches the building, they encounter a large force of rebel soldiers. Lilith and the others immediately engage them and begin clearing a path. Their combined efforts allow Toru and Julie to push ahead toward their objective. When they finally enter the building, they discover that Kevin has been waiting for them. Rather than moving on with his mission, he chose to stay behind because he wants to personally witness Toru's despair like an even sadist Jeffrey Epstein. He mocks the duo and makes it clear that he has no intention of letting them leave victorious. With neither side willing to back down, a fierce battle begins. Elsewhere, the confrontation between Tomoe and Miyabi continues. Rather than trying to overpower her partner, Tomoe focuses on enduring the attacks while waiting for the fusion equipment to fail. Throughout the fight, she repeatedly reminds Miyabi that her true strength never came from artificial enhancements and vibrating glow sticks. However, Miyabi violently rejects those words. She claims that their partnership never meant anything, and finally admits the real reason she sought power in the first place. Everything she did was motivated by her desire to gain Toru's acknowledgement. At this point, Tomo finally understands the depth of her pain. Even as Miyabi attempts to leave and chase after Toru, Tomo refuses to step aside. She tells Miyabi that she never needed overwhelming power to be worthy and apologizes for assuming she always understood what her partner was feeling. Those sincere words finally begin breaking through Miyabi's emotional walls. Cracks start spreading across the experimental armor as the fusion device becomes unstable. Despite Miyabi's attempts to resist, Tomo closes the distance and slaps her across the face like a mother high on cocaine. The strike shatters the device's core and finally frees Miyabi from its influence. Although she regains her senses, the destruction of the equipment leaves her clothing in ruins. Meanwhile, Kevin continues fighting Toru and Julie inside the conference building. He mocks the idea of duo partners supporting one another and views emotional bonds as nothing more than weaknesses. During the battle, he receives confirmation that Miyabi's fusion device has stopped functioning. This news immediately sends him into a rage. Now, Kevin begins hurling explosives toward Julie without restraint. Seeing this, Toru instinctively throws himself in front of the attacks to shield her. Amused by Toru's willingness to sacrifice himself, Kevin orders his men to focus their attacks on the injured boy. After regaining consciousness, Julie sees Toru covered in injuries and is horrified by his condition. At the same time, Toru realizes he has reached his limit and can no longer get his flagpole rock solid. Desperate to protect Julie, he finally uses the injection Sakuya previously gave him. and to his surprise, the effects are immediate. A massive surge of power courses through his body, dramatically increasing his abilities. The balance of the battle shifts almost instantly, leaving Kevin stunned as Toru begins overwhelming both him and his soldiers. Refusing to accept defeat, Kevin orders a full-scale attack, but by then, the situation has already slipped beyond his control. After fighting through the remaining rebels, Lilith and Tora finally arrive to support Toru and Julie. Feeling hopeless at this point, Kevin attempts one final counterattack, but it proves completely ineffective against Toru's newfound strength. At last, the Academy secures their victory against the rebels. The outcome leaves Edward Walker humiliated in front of the conference attendees. Despite the successful defense, Sakuya remains focused on Toru's development and quietly wonders how far his growth will continue and how long his flagpole will be in a few months. Elsewhere, Kevin lies defeated among the wreckage, unable to accept that he lost to someone he considered inferior. When Edward arrives and begins berating him for his failure, Kevin finally snaps. Deciding he no longer has any use for his master, he unalives Edward on the spot. With Edward gone, Kevin abandons all remaining restraint. Driven by a darker resolve, he activates his ultimate level armor and prepares for one final confrontation with Toru. Although Toru and the others emerge from the building victorious, their celebration doesn't last long. Kevin suddenly reappears like an avoidant situationship, proving that he's far from finished. Determined to show how much he's improved, Tora immediately attacks him, but the attempt ends in disaster when Kevin effortlessly shatters his blaze. Lilith quickly follows up with an attack of her own, only to be overwhelmed and knocked unconscious moments later. Kevin then takes advantage of his advanced armor and launches himself into the sky like Goku. From above, he unleashes a massive energy blast that completely destroys the administration building. With all obstacles removed, he focuses entirely on Toru, repeatedly battering him across campus before finally sending him crashing into the Academy's clock tower. As the confrontation continues, Kevin reveals that his obsession goes beyond simply defeating Toru. He wants to prove that Toru's desire to protect his partner is a weakness. Despite the punishment he's taking, Toru refuses to abandon his beliefs and continues standing by his convictions. A few moments later, Julie arrives to support him, and the two launch a coordinated attack against Kevin. However, they quickly discover that his status as a level 4 exceed makes him incredibly difficult to damage. Realizing that defeating the duo directly will take too much effort, Kevin changes tactics. So instead of targeting them, he decides to attack the students living in the dormitories like American soldiers in Syria. He begins charging his weapons to maximum power, preparing a blast capable of leveling the entire residential area. Just before disaster strikes, Rito arrives and intervenes. Drawing upon her hidden strength, she successfully deflects the incoming attack and saves the dorms from destruction. The feat leaves her visibly exhausted, but it creates an opening for Toru and Julie to retreat. Rather than continue fighting near the academy, the pair lure Kevin into the nearby forest. They hope the terrain will give them some sort of advantage against his overwhelming firepower. However, the pursuit quickly turns into a frantic battle through the woods, with Kevin relentlessly chasing them through the trees. During the struggle, Julie spots an opportunity and launches herself from cover. She manages to get close enough to permanently disable one of Kevin's guns, but the maneuver ends up costing her an arm she uses to please herself. With this, the situation immediately worsens. Seeing Julie hurt, Toru becomes overly focused on protecting her from Kevin's remaining weapon. That brief lapse in concentration allows Kevin to strike, which cuts Toru down, leaving him motionless on the ground like a blow-up doll. The sight of Toru falling triggers something inside Julie. Overcome by fear, grief, and anger, she unleashes a terrifying power that she can no longer control. Consumed by rage, she enters a transformed state and begins attacking Kevin with overwhelming force. For the first time in the battle, Kevin finds himself on the defensive. His armor starts breaking apart under Julie's relentless attacks, and one weapon after another is destroyed. No matter how hard he fights back, he can't stop the barrage. Before long, he's left critically wounded and completely disarmed. As the dust settles, Julie stands over the defeated Kevin, fully prepared to end his life. But before she can strike, Toru regains consciousness and calls out to her. Realizing she's being consumed by her hatred, he desperately tries to bring her back to her senses. Shockingly, Julie turns her aggression toward him instead. Anticipating the attack, Toru raises his shield and prepares himself, but he eventually lowers his guard like a total simp and gets ready to die at her hands. When Julie charges at him, Toru doesn't fight back. Instead, he steps forward and embraces her juggernauts. That simple act succeeds where everything else has failed. The darkness consuming Julie begins to fade, and she slowly regains control of herself. Even then, Kevin refuses to accept defeat. Humiliated and consumed by bitterness, he gathers what little strength he has left and prepares one final attack against the duo. But this time, Toru and Julie are perfectly synchronized. Together, they manifest a powerful shield that effortlessly absorbs Kevin's last attack before completely neutralizing it. Now, Kevin desperately attempts to gather energy for one final strike, but Toru moves first. Grabbing one of Julie's swords, he rushes forward and delivers a decisive blow. The attack shatters Kevin's experimental equipment once and for all, bringing the conflict to its definitive conclusion. The following morning, reconstruction efforts are already underway across the academy. Students work together to repair the damage left behind by the battle while others recover in the hospital. Among those visiting the infirmary is Miyabi. Filled with regret, she sincerely apologizes for her actions and the danger she caused. Like the simp he is, Toru accepts her apology without hesitation, assuring her that he harbors no resentment and expressing his hope that everyone can continue growing stronger together. Elsewhere, students gather around Sakuya to thank her for saving the dormitories. After recovering enough to leave the hospital, Toru receives an invitation to a tea party hosted by Lilith. During their conversation, she finally reveals Kevin's tragic past. According to her, the loss of his brother and the collapse of his family pushed him down the path that eventually led to madness. Lilith also explains that Sakuya wanted Toru to learn about Kevin's history. She believed understanding his enemy would help him mature as he continued pursuing the path toward becoming an absolute duo. Before the conversation ends, Lilith mentions that Julie has already checked herself out of the hospital, and upon hearing this, Toru immediately leaves to find her. His search eventually leads him back to the Academy's clock tower, where Julie has been waiting like a dork. Julie finally explains that the power she unleashed is known as El Awake, an ability separate from the standard powers of an Exceed. She admits that she's always feared Toru would reject her if he ever saw that side of her. Instead of pulling away, Toru responds with understanding. He apologizes as well, believing that he failed her by allowing the situation to reach such a desperate point in the first place. With both of them finally being honest about their fears and weaknesses, they renew their promise to one another. Having overcome their greatest enemies as well as the darkness within themselves, Toru and Julie move forward with a bond that has become stronger than ever before. Comment down below, huge jugs if you watch till the end. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video.